Hi, I'm Christian Lucas, and I'm going to explain my own model of communication. To understand what my model means, it's easy to start out by understanding what a more simple model of communication is. Generally, a simple model of communication is when there's a sender and a receiver. The sender will think of something they have to say, then their brain will transfer that information into words, and then they will audibly say something to the receiver. The receiver then hears the words and then deciphers that information in their brain to understand what someone is saying. In my model of communication, which I call detached communication, it is a very similar thing. So you have a sender who has something to say, they think about it, then audibly explain something to the receiver who hears it and then understands it. Where my model is different from the original model is that when the receiver hears it, they don't respond back to the sender, they actually pass on that information to another person. And I think this is a really interesting model to talk about because when someone hears something, like anybody in the world, they understand what someone is saying slightly different than somebody else. That's because every single person in the world has experiences that are completely different than everybody else. So no matter what the information is, they're probably going to process it just a little bit different. So what this means is when that person is receiving this information and then they're explaining it to somebody else, they're probably telling the story a little bit different or the information relaying it a little bit different. And then when that person hears the information, they pass it along to another person and then another person and then another person. And what can happen is the information can get so far away from the point that it is actually not even relevant to the original fact. And I think it's extremely important to understand this model where you have one person communicating an idea to another person, and that person communicates the idea to another person, and so on and so forth. That they completely lose the overall message of the communication. So when it gets back to the original person who had the idea, it can be almost nothing what they originally intended. And this can be a way of how gossip starts. Think about high school gossip or anything like that. And very similar to the game Telephone. It's just very important to understand why some information gets spread and it turns out to be almost nothing like you originally intended. With this method of communication, or this model rather of communication, you can better understand why some people might completely disagree about similar things, totally based off of other people's interpretation of what they were trying to say. Thank you.